And I love that intro because I wrote it and I'm pretty good at these things. So I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you so much for coming. I know it's at the end of the day and you might be getting a bit tired. I appreciate that. I'm going to be talking about some pretty intense things, maybe some good stories too. But hey, we're all here for a reason. We all work in tech. It's very hard and burnout is a big topic. So looking around the room, I can already tell at least one of you are burnt out in here. Do you know how I know? Because that one person is me. I'm burnt out right now. So good at it. You might be thinking, if you're burned out, how can you be on stage talking about it then? Why are you even here doing it? And I thought, actually, it's a good reason because I can speak on it from experience. This isn't even the first time I've been burned out. I've done it a few times. Pretty good at it. Even better at recovering from it and figuring out how to live with the reality that burnout can happen. In 2018, I was really burned out. And I decided that I would post on Instagram 100 days of self-care. It's basically me showing up to Instagram, a platform I no longer use, and saying, hey, here's this thing I did for myself today to help me survive. So I'm going to share with you quite a few stories, not my entire life story, but definitely a few key moments. And this is just going to play in the background. It doesn't perfectly link to my talk, but it's every 12 seconds it'll change. So for the neurospicy amongst us, might just keep us entertained. Might be enough. So when I was growing up, I grew up on Bundjalung country, which is the Northern Rivers near Byron Bay, and I had a wonderful time there, but I was pushing myself in education really hard. My mum instilled in me that education could be my way to a better future. And so I pushed myself every day. I was studying hard. I was doing the extra homework. I was your absolute, A team member, completely sucking up to the teacher, trying to get my best grades. And that was my very first experience of burnout. And burnout, for those of you who haven't had it, congratulations, you're one of just a few people in here. But it's very tricky because it can really deplete your energy. And it's hard to know that it's even happening when it first starts. It's really slow. For any of you who've gone through it, it's so gradual that you almost don't even recognize it. And by the time that you realize you're burned out, you're burned. You're not burning. So today, I'm not going to try to convince you or even necessarily find a way for you to not have burnout. I don't even know if it's truly possible in our industry. What I am going to do is try to share with you some stories of how every time I had it, I got better at recognizing it, which means you could get better at kind of changing your pathways, redirecting it, and then finding a way to survive. Once you've found your way to survive, and I will give you plenty of tips on how I've survived, you'll see plenty of examples of techniques during the slideshow. I also want to try to give you some ideas on how to thrive, and I think that it's a very individual journey. Burnout is not one and done. It does not look the same on everybody. It looks completely different, actually. So that means your recovery journey will be completely different, completely custom to you. So these are my playbook, but your playbook is for you. You've got to define how you're going to do it. And I encourage you to think about any of these things if they resonate with you, and if they don't, that's fine. This is your journey, should you go and experience burnout. Not that I wish it upon you, but if it happens. And the other thing I wanted to share with you straight off the bat is that when I say burnout, I'm talking about workplace-specific burnout. But I also included breakdowns in the name of my talk. And when I say breakdowns, I mean depression. And that can be triggering for many people. It certainly was for me. So if I say one, it does mean that one, but it's also kind of synonymous. I don't know if anyone's actually experienced one or the other, but if you've experienced burnout, it looks a lot like depression. And if you get burned out and it goes too far, it can lead to depression. And then you've got a double whammy. And that's really hard. So when I first did this talk, the feedback was I talked too much about depression, not enough about burnout, and I hadn't shown them the synonymous nature of the two. So this time I'm going to do a bit on both. All right, so I'm going to rewind. I've taken you back to Bundjalung country where I grew up. My next experience of burnout was on Gadigal land in Sydney. I was fresh out of uni, I'd done my undergrad, really enjoyed my time there, but it's exhausting studying. I don't know about you, but I was also pushing myself pretty hard. I was trying to get P's, get degrees, and that was still taking it out of me. So I decided to go on a gap year and try to reset. That helped me a lot. A lot of people recommend that kind of thing. Then my first job out of uni, I was working for a technology media-based company, and we were writing articles, for the customers. And my experience was I was so new to the workforce, I didn't even know the signs, and I was unhappy publishing the content that I was doing. I was pushing myself to go to events outside work hours to be networking and be part of it. I was then meeting people that were telling me just keep grinding, and every time I told someone, hey, it's not working for me, they would then say, but that's the nature of work. That's what it's like working in the industry. And I had no better reference point, so I just kept going. We move on a little bit, and I find myself not wanting to go to work, and I couldn't recognize whether or not that was just not this work or if that was work in general, so I just kept grinding. Then I'm crying before I'm going to work. Sometimes I would cry after I went to work. And in that particular job, the stress was so bad that I found myself just exhausted constantly. And the burnout showed up in a way that I had never anticipated, which was in my gut. I got sick, physically ill, from the mental stress and pressure that I was putting on my body. And I don't think a lot of people talk about the interaction between your brain and your gut biome, but it's enormous. I encourage you to research it. My stress was physically in my gut, and I ended up getting what the doctors would describe as kind of non-specific irritable bowel, which for anyone who's had it just means they don't fucking know what's going on, but it's bad. And they asked you to stop eating all these things and just go on these crazy diets and just asked so much of you. And I was like, what are you talking about? Why is the food that I am eating impacting me so much? And I was in the bathroom for hours and hours, just not happy for months. And I went to the doctor and I said, can you help me? Surely this is something you can help me with. And then they're saying irritable bowel, which means they don't actually have a specific treatment plan for you. They actually recommended, to me anyway, that I get a colonoscopy. But my next appointment availability was 3 months away. So I've got to get between here and there, and it was quite challenging. And I'm experiencing all this stress at work, didn't know it was connected to my gut, and I didn't know how to figure it out. But because I'm a data-based person, also a very emotional-based person, but data-based, I decided I would write in my diary what I was eating so that I could assess what was going on. And the reason I mention that is because tracking myself was my very first step of figuring out what was going on with me. And the doctor wasn't able to do that. So when a month of diary food tracking has gone by, I've acknowledged, I can see that there are 3 key ingredients that are triggering me. Every time I eat them, I'm getting sick, and they were part of my favorite foods. That was very frustrating. But I decided I would stop eating them because I did it. And that was 2 months ahead of the colonoscopy. I stopped eating those foods, and my gut started to calm down. I started to recognize that it was less inflamed. And then I didn't eat them for 3 months. And after 3 months, got really drunk one night. I was really excited. I was like, I'm going to order, because it was spaghetti bolognese. It's like one of my favorite foods, but it's got a couple of the ingredients I couldn't have. Ordered spaghetti bolognese. No problems. I was like, hang on a second. What are we doing here? And I know you're thinking, isn't this about burnout? Why is she talking about her gut so much? It's about spaghetti bolognese. It's because they were so linked, I was able to figure out that my stress in my day job and the dissatisfaction I was experiencing in my day was impacting my body. And once I was able to recognize that within my body and kind of recalibrate myself, then I was able to reset. And I think it's important to acknowledge that that was all before the colonoscopy. So I was already good by the time it came around. I was like, I don't even need that. I'm good now. So that was my first burnout. Second, sorry, because after school. Then when I was in that burnout at work, it led to a depression because I did not see how much it was impacting me. And that depression was very much work specific, but I just was depleted, completely depleted. So one of the things I recognized was that the job I was doing was also not quite right for me. And so I wanted to make changes in that space. I left that job, decided I would do a master's in entrepreneurship. And I did that at the Wade Institute in Melbourne. And it was a 1-year MBA, very intense. So intense that I didn't have time for burnout until the end of the year, when I was then critically burned out because I'd just done the year of that. So has that ever happened to anybody where you got to the end of something and then realized you were down? Yep, a few people in here. See some nodding. Then I was, trying to figure out what I would do next. And I decided to work for a not-for-profit. And not-for-profits, for anyone who hasn't worked in them, fantastic. They're really energetic. People want to do something great for the community. And they ask a lot of you. But what happens in a not-for-profit is that you have to wear a lot of hats. So you're then sharing your knowledge across all these different things. And in not-for-profits, they're not making any money, so you're definitely not making any money, which is harder for everyone in your household. And then they're asking for grants, and you have to put your whole body on the line to do it. So these not-for-profit spaces, they're also stressing you out. And then that stress, as I said, can lead to burnout. Then I decided to change from not-for-profit land, worked in consulting for a bit. Thought that's the way to go. Here, I'm gonna be making bank, it's gonna be great, it'll be less stress, it'll be on my own hours. Yes, my own hours that were 10 plus hours a day, because the expectation is that I'm there for the customer no matter when the customer wants me, and that's all the damn time. So now I'm stressed out for a whole new reason in that space. When I changed from consulting, I decided that startups was where I was going to be at. I was like, yes, here we go. I can see you all laughing. You're like, yeah, nah, she's fucked. Like, there's no way she's not getting burned out there. That's for damn sure. And you were 100% right. Nailed it in one. I was totally burned out. But I loved it. Oh, I was so frustrated because I loved it so much. I was so excited to be doing the startup thing. And I loved wearing all those hats. I was so dynamic. It was interesting. I was getting stressed, for sure. And I was getting tired, but I was exhilarated at the same time. I don't know if that's ever happened to any of you before, where you're a crisp of a human, but happy-ish, maybe? And so startups, I kept in that space because I thought it was really dynamic. I felt I was with my people. And I went into a scale-up. And so I mentioned earlier that I worked for Camplify. And at Camplify, we were pre-IPO, so trying to scale the shit out of it, which, who wants to guess what I had? A little bit of the B, a little bit of the burnout. Definitely had that, for sure. But again, exciting, energized, loving life. It's like really cool to play in. And I thought it was really great. And we were also expanding globally at the same time. So then the pressure on me is working all hours of the day. And I was also, at the time, the customer success manager, which means I'm on the social media accounts. And people be writing mean messages in at 9 p.m. That is not work-life balancing, my friends. But hey, the expectation on me was that I would be doing it. So I did it. Then I'm writing hundreds of FAQs. I'm doing chatbots before chatbots were even cool. I'm working so hard to help this company scale up. And for anyone that's been in a scale up, it's totally exciting. Then I tried to take a step back from the startup land, and I wanted to move more into technology. And so Camplify, for anyone who's following along, is a SaaS-based product, and I had done a lot of work in events and media before that, and so I was taking my information, customer-based knowledge, and now I wanted to turn them into technological insights. I wanted to move into product development. So I decided to do a course at RMIT, just a quick, few weeks to learn how Agile works. And I think, in a way, that's one of the reasons why so many of us experience burnout here, because it's Agile for a reason. It's quick turnarounds on things where the expectation is really high. And so for a lot of us in the room, I'm sure if you're like me anyway, your stress level is here because that's the expectation is there. And that's where Agile begins. So I'd done Agile, and I was like, amazing. I started working in the agency landscape. And again, you're focused on what one customer needs at a time. And one of the customers I worked for is Bradkin. And that's a steel mining supplier in Newcastle, in Awabakal land. And it is a behemoth of an organization. I'm one of 3,500 employees. At Camplify, I was within the first 50, at Mudbath in the first 100, and then within Bradkin, it's a 100-year-old company, so I'm probably like 100,000th person. So that's a completely different game again. And I found that the pressure of that environment was also different. So the stress level upon you is another echelon. Now I'm dealing with executives to move things. I'm moving on digital transformation. My baseline has changed quite a lot. So at this massive company, now I'm working as the kind of originally UX specialist, but effectively a BA that's now turning into a product development manager. And I product development managed the software portfolio for the last few years, working on all sorts of different products, everything from native apps, web apps. We built a customer platform. We've started working in digital twin work. We have some AI vision where we have a lot of cool things happening. And that's where my IoT experience has been over the last few years. But there's no downgrade in the pressure. If anything, as my career has progressed, so too has the pressure and the level of expectation at all of these customers and all these companies to perform. So nowadays, I am feeling a bit burnt out. And I'm feeling a bit burnt out because I put everything on the table. I don't leave a lot back. And I think that's to my own detriment. And over that 10-year period I just kind of walked you through, I've learned a lot of things. And I wanted to share a few of those with you. Not just the how to be burned out, but the how to survive, how to work through it. So we mentioned tracking. I do think that is a helpful tool. The other thing is acknowledging that you're not okay. If any of you are nodding along to any of the things I said, or maybe you've had a little bit more experience with burnout or breakdown than perhaps you'd like to admit. And acknowledging it might just be the very first step of you taking your own personal journey to recovery. So, the other thing with burnout is that once you've recognized it, or someone else recognizes it for you and highlights it in a positive way, then you need to figure out how you're going to handle it. And because I said it's a slow, pervasive journey to get to burnout, damn, it's also a slow journey to get out. And if you've ever experienced any kind of breakdown, it's absolutely the same. Down, up, except probably worse, further down. And so I kind of imagine it like I'm going down a mining pit, just really slow, just going down there. But as I've grown and as I've gone through these experiences, I don't need to go all the way down in order to recognize that I'm not okay. So what I would love for you all to take away from this is that you too can find where in the spiral you are and then pull up. That's, I think, as close I'll personally get to not experiencing burnout. If you can find a way to fully get rid of it, then I will come to your talk. And I would love to watch that. Okay, so in the burnout recovery phase, it's important to note that burnout is not a one-day thing. You know, it's not even a week thing. It's not one sprint. It's not 1 month. It could be months, years even of your life. And the recovery may be just as long. And for me, I've had coming out of one and then a new one kind of pops on top. That's fun. That's really exciting. But what I have always done is sought medical advice. And that's why on my linked in the bio for this, it says, I am not a psychologist. I'm not a medical professional. Because I'm not, but also because I have them in my kind of support system. I like to think of it like a board of directors, but for me, like for my life, I've got my doctor, I've got my psychologist, I've got my friends, I've got my family, I've got my husband, I've got anybody who will bloody listen to me, including a few hundred people from Perth at a conference today. And they're all part of my support system. And I try not to necessarily to overwhelm one with everything, because I think that's a bit too much. And certainly my husband would say that he can't fix all of my problems. Be good if he could. Oh well. My psychologist can't either. My doctor can't as well. And so if you are experiencing any issues, my first recommendation, apart from acknowledging it, is to seek a doctor. And I don't know whether or not you have a doctor that's already in your team, but it's important to find one that actually listens to you. And I'm not talking about one where you come in and you say, I'm sick, and they give you a pill and then see you later. I'm talking about one who can actually hold a conversation and see you in a real lens and try to figure out what's going on. So a good doctor. How to find one? If you haven't got a good one, recommend that you Google in your area. People do review these things, but if nothing else, try a few. You don't have to settle for one, just one. Try another one. So once you've got a doctor, every doctor in Australia has the ability to provide you a mental health care plan. And I'm going to walk you through that only because it surprises me how many people do not know how to get mental health support, even though you could get it in Australia. So a mental health care plan, for those of you who haven't had any experience with it, is at least 6 sessions provided by Medicare at a reduced cost fare to you. And you pay the gap. Those 6 sessions can be redeemed in any calendar year. And if you use them, they enable you to a psychologist of your choosing, or even more than one if you prefer. But 6 sessions across a calendar year, and once you've had the first 6 sessions, if it's less than a calendar year, you can go back in for a little mental health care review, and they give you a 4 more. So that's 10 sessions with a licensed psychologist, counselor, professional in your area that can support you in wherever you are. And when I first got psychological help, which is now forever ago, I didn't know whether or not the psychologist was for me, because each psychologist is very different in how they handle things. There are 10 plus different ways you can actually have psychology, different methodologies, different practices. Some of them are in person, some of them are online. Again, it's like a smorgasbord of people. So if you want a psychologist and you've never had one before, I recommend looking up APS website, psychology. I'll have the link at the end. But that's finding a proper psychologist in your area. And that is incredibly helpful. Over the years, I've probably had half a dozen now that I've lived in a few different cities. My current one knows me so well, she's telling me things I can't see, which is what they're meant to do that, except that they don't always do that. They're not movie psychologists. They don't nail it every time. But what I can tell you, if you've never had one, is the very first session you go in, they may or may not even give you a piece of advice that you could use straight away. It often takes up to 3 sessions with a psychologist before they can pass you on anything valuable. And you don't even know if you like them yet in the first session. So what I recommend doing is having a quick call with them beforehand. Almost every psychologist I've ever had interaction with would do a 5 to 10 minute call, and you can just vibe check with them. Are these your people? Do they give you like reasonable advice? If you're a really data-centric person, you probably don't want too much emotional stuff going on. If you're a really emotional person, you probably don't want too much data stuff going on, or some kind of, balance in between. But you vibe check with them, you book in an appointment. It does actually take a little while to get an appointment, a couple of months for a lot of psychologists, unfortunately. So you need you need some way to get between wherever you are and that appointment. And the services for you are online. Beyond Blue, Lifeline, Butterfly. In fact, there's so many. They are unbelievable. You can ask your LLM for what's your favorite one in your area. But those services will get you to your psychological appointment. Should you go down the psychology pathway, and I am a big advocate for it because of my personal experiences, use all the sessions. I'm actually in a maintenance phase now where I use the 10 and I book the 10 before I even have issues. I just know I'm going to have them, just constantly burned out, constantly depressed, or some variant in between. And if I'm not, how good, I just go in there and I'm like, yeah, everything's sweet. Then she's like, hey, do you want to dive into some like deep, nasty thing we've been avoiding? I'm like, no, not today, maybe next month. JK, I do dive into the big things and have resolved a lot of shit. It's excellent. Do recommend. But even if you don't, then whatever is happening for you in that month that is hard to deal with or that is stressing you out, then they can be there right there. If I were to wait for an appointment that was not booked and then had something come up, by the time I get in that appointment, it's going to be probably resolved. Maybe not. I don't know. That's just my experience. So psychology has been a huge help to me in my life, and I love it. I'm a big fan of it. I'm in maintenance phase, probably do it forever, just pay them $1 bajillion and, hope that I'm a good human as a return. I don't know. But I think that that's important to know, is that these people can be supportive of who you are today and whatever issue you're going through. And that's a doctor that you're checking in with, that's a psychologist. Now let's talk about friends and family. How do you actually talk about your issues with them in a loving environment? Many people I know don't have experience talking about their emotions, and we are in a society that encourages it nowadays, but if you've never have, I think it's a bit challenging to start. And my husband, who's in the room, would tell you that he had very little emotional experience before he met me, and then he had to quickly learn how to deal with that so that he could help me or be there for himself. And he's on his own personal journey, and I certainly won't share his journey for you, but what I will say is that we're all at different stages on this journey of our own mental health, and that's really important. The tips I could give you for the very beginning of your journey are completely different to the tips I would give you now over here at the stage I'm at now. But it's custom. So sharing it with your family and friends is very important, but also you need to be aware of, or consider at least, what their emotional reaction will be. If you have parents or friends or family who have very little EQ, so emotional intelligence, then they may provide to you feedback that is inappropriate for your mental health state, especially if you're in a really vulnerable place with your mental health, in a state of burnout or depression. So I recommend being considerate of who you share it with. I'm not saying don't share it, that's not my advice. But if you're in a situation where that person can't meet you where your mental health is, it may be safer for you to hold it. Not because I want you to keep it all inside, that's not the advice, just so that you can be safe. So choosing those safe places is very important. And in the workplace, sharing it with your employers can be very hit and miss. I don't know if any of you have ever had experiences with HR, but sometimes they're really helpful, and sometimes they're looking out for the business. They're not necessarily looking out for you. And it's kind of like that with a lot of the employers as well. I once remember sharing with my direct manager that I was going through a really hard time. And I was just sobbing, because that's standard in my life. And I was sharing it with him, and he had no capacity to do it this particular thing at that moment, and he just shut it right down. That's not appropriate for work. That is not a safe place to be. I was like, oh, okay. That's not okay. That's not actually the standard we live in. And we're all here at this amazing tech conference. We have enormous expectations upon us to build great technology. We need to be emotionally safe to do that. And if you're not in a safe space and they can't meet you in a safe space, then that's going to be a lot harder for you to get through. So I started using that information and the negative experience I had to filter out employers. So when I would go to the interview of a new place, I would be saying, hey, what is your mental health practice? What are you doing to support your employees? And if I compare startup land, consulting land, agency land to corporate, they will have completely different practices on how they do it. When I was in startup land, there was no HR to begin with. When I was in scale-up land, we were lucky if we had one person in HR. In corporate land, there's hundreds of them. They're everywhere. But they don't, well, they say they care about me. I don't know. Maybe they do. But I do know that I care about me. So my journey is about how I can do self-care. That's why I did this 100 days, trying to figure out myself. How could I be accountable to me on social media? So probably accountable to others as well. And it's really helpful to know that all those people that you share or don't share it with have their own experience of mental health too. There are some people in my life who are so well versed in mental health, they could be the psychologist. There are so many others that I'm around who have zero experience with it and are very content staying there. So that's not really a safe space I would advise you to share with. So let's imagine that there's a spectrum of mental health, good or bad. There's a spectrum of how people deal with it. And then there's all different kinds of shapes and sizes of it in startup, corporate, all these different fascinating spaces. So there's a whole gambit of it, is what I'm saying. Everyone's got a different spin on it. So where I land now is I work in corporate, and I had the opportunity to get a mental health first aid certificate, and I got that earlier this year. And it means that I'm able to share a safe space for individuals that I work with in my office. And the first step of Mental Health Club, is don't talk about yourself. But that's why I spent, 30 minutes talking about myself so far? It's definitely really good at it. But what I thought was funny was that when I did that course, it's a one-day course, as if one day would be enough time to prepare to be a mental health consultant in some way. But what I thought was hysterical was that all of their examples of what mental health looked like in anxiety or depression or burnout and all these things, I'd experienced all of them. Too many of them, actually. I was a bit freaked out. I was like, Jesus, I could run this thing. But it has allowed me to make a space for my colleagues. And I've had some people I work with go through intense divorces that have put a big impact on them at home, and then they've brought that energy into work, and they just simply can't deal with the volume of shit that comes from their job that they experience burnout. And I've had other people that I work with go through mental health issues being forced upon them in a way, probably not the right wording, but when you go through issues with team members and it becomes harassing or bullying, it is a situation sometimes outside of your control that can have a huge impact on your own personal mental health, and then again lead to burnout in some scenarios. So helping those people through those issues has been very enlightening for me, and actually very rejuvenating in some way, because I've been able to share with them how they could get through. So, all right, we've gone through tracking, acknowledging, family and friends, doctors, psychology. There's so many people who can help you, so many resources online that can help you. That's how you survive. I want to talk about how you can thrive. So, if you are experiencing any kind of breakdown or burnout, and you've sought those professional help and the people around you, then people are going to tell you that the next thing you have to do is self-care. And obviously you've seen my slide deck, you've seen some examples of self-care. But I shit you not, when the first person told me self-care, I was like, ugh, eye roll, I heard it, I know it, thank you, next. And self-care is at the absolute base of where we are. It's talked about so much, I think it's actually totally lost meaning for a lot of people, especially for me anyway. And it can be anything from what your sleep is, what your exercise is, how you communicate and share with other people. It's so multifaceted. But my tip with self-care is that you need to start with one thing. And I recommend that you build on it. Once you get really good at that first thing, build on it with the second thing, and it will keep compounding, which is why I recommended the Atomic Habits, because you can keep adding onto your journey and habit stacking, if you will, until you get to a point where you're a bit happier and you're moving past survival mode. So I encourage you to look up what are the things that bring you joy once you've experienced some burnout, you've got some help, and you get back to a kind of base level, and you start to stabilize. Then you've nourished yourself enough that you can now add on more fun things, like any of the things in my slide deck or anything that's relevant to you, and you start to rejuvenate and build up. That is how you thrive. It is not about not having burnout or not having a breakdown. It is not even about how to figure out how you're going to survive it. It is about figuring out how you are going to find a sustainable pace to survive the tech industry that we've all opted in for. It's insanely fast-paced, it's insanely pressuring, there's so much on you. So I hope that you can use some of the tools I've shared today, and you can find what is right for you in your individual journeys, and you can find a way to thrive in your own technology space. Thank you so much. I saw a lot of nodding, which I definitely appreciate, and I wanted to make some time now for the Meet the Expert, except there's no more Meet the Expert space left, it's just Meet Me. So I've got like a few minutes of questions that I wanted to allow for a space, and if nobody asks any questions, I'll just keep rambling and we'll find some new content. But does anyone have anything they want to start with? Even a question, here we go.
Hello, hey.
Hello.
Hey, thank you for sharing your journey and all that sort of stuff. And you probably saw I was nodding along to so many things.
Yeah.
Resonates a lot. Just a quick one, it's like, for me, one of the most hardest things is kind of one's connection between one's own identity and work, and kind of the stress that comes to that. And almost like a part of an addiction, like, I can see that you've been through startups. I've also been through startups, and that kind of like that desire to learn and take control, and kind of like all the beautiful feelings you get out of that, but also the stress that comes with that. And you kind of naturalize it, and it builds, right? It gets really, really intense. So my question is, like for me, is like, at what point in time did you realize that work was becoming a very strong indicator of your own identity, and do you think that was a very close connection to burnout? Because I personally felt it was.
For sure.
And how did you start breaking up those systems? Like for me, it's basically going back to your talk, but for me it was like, started cycling, started getting into mechanical keyboards, like started trying to break away, but it's a long journey. So like, I just kind of want to know, what did you do to what was it that made you realize, if that was the case, that work was such a big identifier of your life and led to a lot of the burnout? And more importantly, what activities did you pick up that kind of started making you feel separated from that sense of work and identity?
Obviously, a few questions laid in there. You know, because I love it because your brain's like imploding, like self-care, mental health, I have other things. You know, I totally get that. Appreciate it. And truthfully, the connection between self-worth and my work, that's like at least 3 years worth of therapy right there. Yeah. You know, like that's a big one. But it's so poignant because I don't know about any of the other millennials in the room, but I feel like that was like baked in as like a, you know, if you do this, then this happens, succeed. Perfect. So if that doesn't work, I'm fucked. Everything is fucked. Perfect. So good. Love that for me. Recognizing it, I think, is different for everyone. When that one happened when I was working and then got sick, I mean, I had no idea. 0 clue. I was at the doctor. She was like, you have irritable bowel. I was like, so fun. What do I do next? And then I was like, oh wait, is this connected to the stress that I'm experiencing? And then is the stress something I should act on? As in, should I leave that stressful environment? That was hectic. I think as I've gone through the different jobs and the different environments and the different versions of my self-worth, because that's also changed, I think that it calls for a whole new recognition. You know, I say that I'm good at burnout because I've done it like a fragillion times, but that's actually not fun. Like, that's horrendous. But each time's being like less, each time's being less severe, each time's being, not, I wouldn't say faster, but I would recognize it faster. And every time I've recognized it's been different. You know, say it was your physical health one time, say it was, you know, crying at work, really good one. I don't know, everyone has their own one. You're gonna have to find what's your unique identifier. And if you're anything like me and you're all about continuous improvement, you'll be like, never having that one ever again. Ever, ever, ever. And then you get burned out and you'll be like, oh, damn it. I was so sure I wasn't gonna get it this time. But if it's not the same reason, I don't know. I think it's so complex and so nuanced, and I appreciate that you won't have an answer and I won't have an answer, and that's the game. Like, if you can move through it knowing that you could reduce the risk or reduce the severity or something, that's awesome. That feels really good to me. Does that help?
Yeah, no, it's exactly what I was like.
Yeah, it's all the things, cemented in one. Totally messy. Yeah, exactly. And for me, I was happy with my continuous improvement lens. If the mess got smaller, then I was happy. So I was like,
It's all improvement.
yeah. Okay.
That was amazing, Leanora. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have afternoon tea now, so a short break for that. We
Awesome.
have ice creams, I think. Yeah. Any speakers in the room, though, please stay because the photos are happening at 4 o'clock. And then we will see you for the lock note.
And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn to ask me your unique, complex question. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.